Making some movies these days is so complicated and so expensive that an enormous amount of work is done before any film rolls through the camera. Negotiations must be held with bankers, stars, writers, directors, and, as we now learn, with certain unsavory characters you wouldn't see at the Academy Awards. Our segment 3, part 1 of The Mob in the Movies, is reported by Brian Ross.
The Brink stove is the best, Harry.
This is a scene from the new movie, The Brink's Job, about the famous robbery in Boston in 1950. The movie was filmed entirely on location in the north end of Boston, where the robbery occurred. For the producers, making this film in the streets of Boston, and not on the back lots and sound stages of Hollywood, was difficult and expensive. And according to police sources in Boston, the producers of the film went to this man for help. He is Ralph LaMattina, who police say is a mafia boss in Boston's North End. Police made surveillance pictures of associates of LaMattina on the set of the movie. The two men on the left in this picture are members of the film production crew. The man on the right is Joseph Camerata, known in the North End of Boston as Joe Shoes, who police say is an associate of mafia boss Ralph LaMattina. Police say the film company made payments to Joe Shoes and a number of other reputed mobsters to help persuade residents of the North End to cooperate with the movie people. To make this neighborhood look as it did in 1950 for the filming, air conditioners had to be removed. TV antennas had to come down. And this is one of the men the film producers hired to make sure it was all done. And that's not the only problem the producers had. NBC News has learned that a federal grand jury is now investigating how the film The Brink's Job was made, looking into alleged payoffs to mob figures and the role of the Teamsters Union in the movie production. Among the allegations, that the movie company was forced to hire almost twice as many Teamsters as it really needed, that some Teamsters falsified their work records, and that many Teamster jobs on the movie set were given by union officers to men with long criminal records.
Everybody from Los Angeles to Boston,
Dino De Laurentiis, whose company made the movie The Brink's Job, says all the problems with the Teamsters added more than $1 million to the film's cost.
It is true. It is absolutely true. We are obliged to take more people what we are entitled to really we need.
What do you figure it cost you to go along with all the demands of the Teamsters?
Oh, for sure. We spend at least in this area $1 million more.
$1 million more?
Oh, for sure.
Mark. With Hollywood making more and more films on location, the Teamsters are now a very important part of the movie industry. All the vehicles used in making a film on almost every location must have a Teamster driver. Equipment trucks, mobile dressing rooms. On location, some Teamster drivers make as much as $2,000 a week. Even in Westerns, Teamsters are important. They're the wranglers who handle the horses and livestock. And on location, outside of Hollywood, movie producers have often had to deal with Teamster officers who are racketeers and hoodlums. In Houston, a movie producer was told his set would be blown up if he didn't hire extra Teamsters. In Maine, one producer reportedly had to make weekly $1,000 payoffs to a Teamster officer to avoid a strike. And industry sources report in a number of places where movies have been made, Teamsters have used strong-arm tactics to press their demand.
I don't say that's right.
Jack Valenti of the Motion Picture Producers Association.
I have no doubt that some motion picture producer with a $250,000 a day payroll, when he's thwarted by maybe some union man, might very well say, here's $1,000. Can you get this cleared up for me? Is that a bribe? I'm hard put to make a judgment about that.
Last week in Boston, there was a champagne party for the world premiere of the film The Brink's Job. Dino De Laurentiis was there, Jack Valenti was there, and some of the film stars were there. And also there were some of the Teamsters who worked on the film, including this man, who is now one of the Teamsters under federal investigation. Also at the party, Joe Shoes, who police say is one of the organized crime figures who somehow helped make the film.
What was your job in the picture?
My job was security guy.
You were security.
Bodyguard for Peter Falk.
You were the bodyguard for Peter Falk. How'd you get that job?
Two friends.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have
The people who made the Brink job say they did only what they had to do to get it done. But this film is now part of a federal investigation to see if it takes payoffs to the mob and corrupt union officers to make a movie in this country. Tomorrow night, more on organized crime in Hollywood. Brian Ross, NBC News, Boston.
Our segment 3 this evening, part 2 in our series on the mob and the movies. Tonight, a report on a man who started out as a lawyer for the Capone gang in Chicago in the 30s and who is now deeply involved in the movie industry in Hollywood. Here's Brian Ross.
This man is Sidney Korshak. He's not a celebrity, and he's not the head of a major studio. But in the movie industry, many people say Sidney Korshak is perhaps the most powerful figure in Hollywood, the man who makes a lot of things happen. State and federal investigators say one reason Korshak is so powerful here is that he is one of the most important men in organized crime in the country. This report of the California Organized Crime Control Commission lists Sidney Korshak as the key link between the mob and big business, and especially show business. Korshak started out as a lawyer for mobsters in the Capone gang in Chicago in the 1930s. This was Korshak in 1957 when he was called before the McClellan Senate Rackets Committee investigating labor racketeering. For years, according to federal investigators, Korshak has been the senior advisor to organized crime bosses, looking out for the mob's interest in Nevada and California. And in Hollywood, Korshak has somehow become close to the men who run some of the major studios here. This is the headquarters building for Universal, the largest studio in Hollywood, part of the vast MCA conglomerate. This is the man who runs it, Lew Wasserman, chairman and chief executive officer of MCA. Copies of Wasserman's office phone logs, made available to NBC News, show that Wasserman has frequent contact with Korshak. Wasserman refused to talk to NBC News about Korshak, but federal investigators say the two men have been close for years, and industry sources say one way to do business with Wasserman is to first go to Korshak. One example, in January 1976, there was an important business meeting here at Korshak's house in Bel Air. There were three people here, Korshak, Wasserman, and producer Dino De Laurentiis. The meeting was about this film, King Kong. De Laurentiis wanted to make King Kong, but so did Wasserman. De Laurentiis finally made the picture, but only after making a deal with Wasserman. And the man in the middle of the King Kong deal, Sidney Korshak, the man authorities say represents organized crime, the man whose very presence seems enough to guarantee a multi-million-dollar film deal. In a lawsuit over King Kong, Wasserman was asked what Korshak was supposed to do in the King Kong deal. Question: what was his function or role in this meeting as far as you were concerned? Wasserman: to try and make peace. Producer Dino De Laurentiis was the other person at the meeting at Korshak's house. At first, he denied there was such a meeting. Wasn't there a meeting at Sidney Korshak's house that you attended, along with Lew Wasserman, to discuss King Kong?
No, I never have any meeting with Wasserman and Sidney Korshak.
But told about Wasserman's testimony, De Laurentiis was then able to remember meeting at Korshak's house.
Oh, yeah, I remember now.
And then De Laurentiis recalled more details about the meeting, including who had paid Korshak. Did Sidney Korshak get any money out of King Kong from you?
I think he received something, yes.
How much did he receive?
I will check, but not a big amount of the money.
But he was the man that brought you together and Lew Wasserman together.
Yes.
De Laurentiis later told NBC News he had paid Korshak $25,000 or $30,000 for Korshak's role in the King Kong deal.
NBC News, I wonder if we could talk to you for just a minute. You can.
Korshak would not talk with NBC News about his role in the King Kong deal or any of his other Hollywood deals.
I'd like to ask just a couple of questions.
Will you quit pestering me?
Not pestering you. We would like to ask you a couple of questions.
You're not going to ask me any questions. Now, goodbye.
Korshak has never been arrested or convicted of any crime. But NBC News has learned that the FBI is actively working on an investigation of labor racketeering involving Korshak. At one time or another, many of Hollywood's top agents, stars, and studio chiefs have done business with Sidney Korshak.
And he is now one of the most powerful people in the movie industry, an industry now facing serious charges of corruption. More on that tomorrow night. Brian Ross, NBC News, Beverly Hills.
Our segment 3 this evening, the last in our series on the mob and the movies. The movie industry itself is divided about the degree of corruption within it, about the various state and federal investigations now in progress. Brian Ross has looked into it and has this report.
This is Hollywood. Fred Astaire and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. out for dinner. Flashbulbs, stars, glamour. But this year in Hollywood, much of the attention has shifted from the glamour of show business to the business of show business. This man is the reason why. David Begelman, the former head of Columbia Pictures, who pleaded no contest to stealing from his own studio. The Begelman case has led to a number of investigations about how the men who run Hollywood do business, and with whom. And the Begelman case has shaken the movie industry. The question of corruption has deeply divided people who work in Hollywood.
That's deliberately misleading.
It is not. When you want to talk about deliberately misleading,
Hollywood producers are now fighting about it over a proposal that producers join the Teamsters union. The issue: should producers, in order to get better deals with the studios, become members of the Teamsters, a union with a reputation here for corruption, violence, and ties to organized crime?
They frighten me.
Why?
I'm scared of them.
Why?
They've got a reputation for being rather ruthless.
But actor Jackie Cooper, also a producer, says the producers need the power of the Teamsters.
If somebody says to me, if you're a Teamster, you can wind up in the river with your feet in cement, I can't believe that. I can't believe that.
so do you think pretty soon you'll be a Teamster?
I hope so.
Nothing can happen without trucks to move equipment or to move film. The Teamsters can stop this industry tomorrow.
And that's why.
Very few unions can.
And is that why you want to become a Teamster?
It is one of the reasons.
No other union I know.
Some of the producers who fought the Teamsters said the fight said a lot about Hollywood.
The argument being used, and it was used very effectively on the board of directors of the Producers Guild, was everything is corrupt. Begelman stole $40,000 or $60,000, and if David Begelman did that, that proves that it's corrupt. General Motors steals. All the studios keep double books. Every television network is corrupt. Everything is corrupt.
That's what you hear from.
We're swimming in a pool of corruption. Therefore, why not join the Teamsters?
In their first vote, the producers voted down the Teamsters, but it was a bitter fight, with 90 Hollywood producers voting to join the Teamsters.
People all around this country look upon that business as one of the most interesting ones, as one of the great role models in America. They look at its stars. And
Los Angeles District Attorney John Van de Kamp is now investigating Hollywood corruption.
And a lot of people model their conduct after people in Hollywood. And I think it's time for those who, in a sense, are violating those traditions in the industry to let the world know that they can clean their act up.
Jack Valenti of the Motion Picture Association of America.
I refuse to allow the movie industry to be singled out in a few isolated cases when there is an avalanche of corruption, of payoffs and bribes all over this land. And I just think it's wrong to single out the movie industry for a few.
But the fact is, the motion picture industry is now under intense investigation by state and federal authorities. As reported on Segment 3, a federal grand jury in Boston is now investigating how this movie, The Brink's Job, was made, including allegations of payments to mob figures and corrupt Teamsters. There's a new federal investigation of this man, Sidney Korshak, who authorities believe is the key link between the mob and Hollywood. And in the most celebrated recent case of Hollywood corruption, the Begelman case, David Begelman, within a month after being caught stealing from Columbia Pictures, signed a new deal with Columbia Pictures to produce the film version of the Broadway hit Annie, one of the biggest deals in Hollywood this year. So far, there are few signs that Hollywood is ready to clean up its act. Brian Ross, NBC News, Los Angeles.
We began this series with a report that the people who made that film, The Brink's Job, dealt with organized crime figures while filming scenes in Boston. Today, the director of the film, William Friedkin, held a news conference in Boston and said that he may have met some of the mob figures that we named, but only socially. And Friedkin denied that he had to make payoffs.
The grand jury in Miami is also looking into the possibility of the mob moving in on the movies. And so we have an update this evening from Brian Ross.
I don't believe it's going to happen to you.
This man is a prominent Hollywood film producer who says he is afraid. He says he was threatened by a Teamsters Union officer while making a film on location. He agreed to talk about it on the condition his face not be shown.
You're talking with the Teamster business agent?
Mm-hmm.
And then he asked you to step outside?
Well, he wanted to show us something in his car.
So what happened then?
We walked out of the hotel that we were staying in. We walked over to his car, and he lifted the trunk, and he showed us, I think it was 12 sticks of dynamite.
And the implication was he'd blow you up or blow up yourself?
I never said anything. What was the implication? The implication was that in case he has troubles, that's what he carries the stuff for. Now,
This man is one of a number of Hollywood producers who say some Teamsters use threats of violence and strikes to get their way. This picture was made on the set of the film Black Sunday in Miami. NBC News has learned that a federal grand jury in Miami is now investigating allegations of Teamster extortion and labor law violations in the making of this film and a number of other feature films and television commercials in Florida. In this film, Empire of the Ants, federal investigators say producers of the low-budget horror film were forced to issue a weekly paycheck in the name of a dead man, a Teamster. Authorities say the dead Teamster earned as much as $785 a week. Federal investigators say the dead man's checks were given to officers and former officers of Teamsters Local 390 in Miami. In Washington, a spokesman for the Teamsters Union confirmed the investigation and said the books and records of the Miami local had been subpoenaed by the federal grand jury. Teamster spokesman Bernard Henderson denied any pattern of racketeering by the Teamsters.
I can also say that this union does not condone any illegal activity of any type. And we do support law enforcement officials, including the many thousands of law enforcement officials who are members of the Teamsters Union.
In Boston today, another federal grand jury met to investigate allegations of racketeering affecting the movie business. Among those called to testify, producer Dino De Laurentiis. On a Segment 3 report in December about the making of the movie The Brink's Job, filmed in Boston, De Laurentiis said he was forced to hire more Teamsters than he needed at a cost of $1 million. Later, De Laurentiis said his comments had been taken out of context unfairly. Today, De Laurentiis became upset when reporters tried to question him.
Don't talk to me anymore.
You won't talk to me?
No. It's okay. Don't talk to me anymore.
It's okay.
And you know why?
Why is that?
I can tell you.
De Laurentiis was inside the grand jury room for more than an hour and a half. Federal authorities believe De Laurentiis' company may have been a victim of extortion by Teamsters and mob figures during the filming of The Brink's Job. But NBC News has learned that other federal authorities are investigating De Laurentiis himself. In Rome, the U.S. Customs Service is investigating De Laurentiis' movement of hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash into and out of the United States. In Los Angeles, federal and local authorities want to know more about De Laurentiis' relationship with this man, Dino Conti. Federal authorities say Conti is an ex-convict and an associate of the Genovese Mafia family in New York. NBC News made this film of Conti outside the Beverly Hills office of Dino De Laurentiis, where investigators say Conti spends much of his time. Authorities say Conti is known as a man who moves money for the mob. Conti could not be reached for comment about his relationship with De Laurentiis.
Does Mr. Conti work for Mr. De Laurentiis?
Outside the Boston courthouse today, De Laurentiis would not talk about Conti.
So far, the investigation has led to no charges against De Laurentiis or any members of the Teamsters Union. Still, for the first time since the Hollywood labor racketeering cases of the 1940s, the federal government, with grand juries in Boston and Miami, is now trying to find out whether mobsters and racketeers have made the movie business another one of their targets. Brian Ross, NBC News, Boston.